So let me start off. Before I ask my questions, let me just ask you all for a quick question. We all have different perceptions in the world. We all have different beliefs. Some people are fierce Democrats, some are fierce Republicans. Everyone has their own belief. To me, based on what I believe, what I read, I see climate change as I saw it as an urgent problem 10 years ago. I consider it as more serious than anything. I consider it terrifying, and I consider it something that there's nothing more important to discuss or to solve. However, that's me, that's my life, that's my perception. There's a lot of people that say to me they don't like they don't believe in climate change. They think it's they don't, they have issues with government on certain issues that might be justified, but they think that because of that, the whole climate thing is a hoax. It's a Democratic hoax. And for whatever everyone's reasons are, everyone has a right to figure out whatever they want to figure out. But in the end of the day, there are certain basic things that we want to be clear on. So for the people that are saying, I don't believe climate change, I don't believe this science, I don't believe it's real, can you talk to them for a minute, and then we'll get on to the questions. And if you want to throw in to climate change, you could add and biodiversity loss and ocean acidification and water shortages and everything else related to it. So maybe just speak to our audience for a moment, each of you.
Perhaps I can kick this off by saying I live in Australia, and I think most Australians now, in fact, more than 3/4 of Australians are convinced that climate change is real and that it is affecting us and that we've contributed to it. And the reason for that is because we've experienced it. In Australia, particularly, the droughts have been so severe, the flooding has been so severe, the fires have been so severe, the barrier reef is now on its last legs. And I think that happens when we personally experience the effects of climate change. That's when we start to think, oh, well, things are happening. The water cycles are changing. The amount of water vapor in the atmosphere is more than before. We're getting floods, we're getting rains, we're getting droughts, etc. So I think that's the answer. When people experience it for themselves, then they believe.
I would note that the first experiment that was done to demonstrate that carbon dioxide warms the atmosphere was in 1856. So it's established science for a long time, and we could measure how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere. So it becomes pretty hard to make the case when you see how global surface temperatures have risen to record levels in recent years. And when you see the ice shelves melting, and when you see the violent storms that we have now, and when you know that basic science that was established in 1856, to argue that it isn't happening.
Yeah, I mean, I calculate for a living, right? So I would say to me, the most persuasive nail in the coffin of the sentiments that you sort of made yourself a mouthpiece for just temporarily just now is a set of calculation that is repeated every time the IPCC issues another report, and that is a comparison of global mean temperature calculated in the ensemble members, in other words, the number of different computer models and the number of times each of those is run, it keeps rising. But they do two things. One is that they simulate the climate evolution, let's say in the last 200 years, with every known impact, for example, volcanoes and natural cycles of carbon uptake on land and so forth, in the 11-year solar cycle, all of the external forces on the climate system save one, and that is our emissions, okay? And then an identical set with the same models, the same boundary conditions, the same everything, different in only one way, the inclusion of our emissions. And wouldn't you know it, that the one that knows everything about the climate system except us is more or less flat. It completely misses all the trends that were just invoked, all the different warming, all the melting of icebergs and so forth. Okay, the other one that is cognizant of both the natural forcing and our emissions more or less perfectly tracks observed reality. If you have two competing systems of trying to explain reality, one manifestly fails, and the other one, with a little bit of sloth, perfectly dead on. Adhering to the first of those is theology. That's not fact. I can't argue with theology, but it is not something that productively guides behavior.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we have a number of issues, climate change, biodiversity loss, deforestation, desertification, ocean acidification, rising temperatures, species extinction, what in the world does this have to do with if I eat a cheeseburger? What does it have to do if I eat fish, if I eat eggs? If I go to a diner and someone has chicken, someone has fish, someone has steak, someone has yogurt, a lot of people don't understand how this is affecting all these other things. Can you give us a very basic, simple lesson so that we all are clear how the cheeseburger, the chicken, the fish, the steak, the dairy, the eggs is somehow affecting all these systems and the climate?
Yeah. Can I ask, when you pose a question, maybe you tell us which order you want us to respond.
Why don't you go first, Gidon, and then Glenn, and then Gerard?
Sure. So it's very simple. Producing different food items requires very different resources and different amount of rangeland, different amount of cropland, different amount of fertilizer, reactive nitrogen, different amount of water, and it produces different amount of emissions. And since the problems that we just enumerated all have to do with using resources beyond what is really available to us by the workings of Earth, if you choose a food item that is very resource intensive, and nothing is even close in resource intensity to beef, then you exert a much heavier burden on the planet. When you, on the other hand, consume, let's say, the same number of grams of protein, but from lentils or chickpeas, you basically exert 1 to 2 orders of magnitude less impact on all of those things.
Thank you.
Steve, your question involved what if you have a cheeseburger or what if you have some fish? And all these things have their direct costs in terms of warming the climate. So I have in my book, Food is Climate, a list of all the various ways in which they contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. So you have, with grazing, you have fires set to clear forests for grazing. You have pasture maintenance fires, which are set usually every year. You have foregone sequestration from lost forest and vegetation, known as carbon opportunity cost. You have foregone sequestration from deadened oceans. You have soil destruction from lost vegetation. You have animal respiration. You have ruminant belching of methane, known as enteric fermentation. You have methane and nitrous oxide generated from animal waste. You have nitrous oxide released by nitrogen fertilizers used to grow feed for animals. You have all greenhouse gases derived from energy inputs to grow and transport feed for animals. You have all greenhouse gases derived from energy inputs to have industrial fishing. And you have the greater refrigeration and cooking generally required for animal as opposed to plant foods. So you have all these different causes. And in general, when they do accounting, when the IPCC does accounting, they're not counting many of these when they're comparing direct emissions from fossil fuels to agricultural emissions.